holders are being punished for Australia's sky-high inflation.
A growing number of Aussie households are being trapped in a mortgage prison.
All the ones who are mortgage prisoners now since borrowing capacity, it's the ones who leveraged up with Pepper and Liberty. They become mortgage prisoners at banks that will charge them too much in interest rates.
And that's the problem, right? These people that are taking on arguably too much debt and they can't hold it, have to sell it, they've essentially walked away sometimes with nothing. People don't understand the risk of investing. But if you push your debt, your income to the nth degree, there's a storm potentially coming.
Capital city investors have been bailing because they've got mortgages they want to pay. So the ones who thought about lending really carefully, made sure they didn't over leverage, structured the loan the right way, they've been able to ride the wave. I think once people really grasp that, it's game of lending.
You're listening to the Follio Property Podcast. I'm Reece Bettle and I'm here each week with my co-host Lachlan Delahunty. Lachlan, you've been telling me to get rid of this intro for months now. I'm still got it.
Still just ripping away with it.
Put in the comments if everyone's over this intro, please let us know. But today is a very special day. We want to get big guests in 2026, Lachlan. We're back in Sydney for another big guest. This particular guest is one of the top mortgage brokers in Australia. Hosts 4 podcasts, which, knowing how hard it is for us to do one.
That blows me away more than anything. You get the time to do that. It's impressive.
A thought leader in the mortgage industry, previously in the financial planning space, founder and director of Alcove. Welcome to the podcast, Chris Bates.
Looking forward to this. It's going to be fun.
Hey guys, quick thing to share. If you're serious about investing in Australian property right now, you need to see what we put together. It's called the National Investment Report, and it's our brand new monthly deep dive into exactly where the market is moving, what the data is saying, and what the smart investors are looking at right now. You can get the first access completely free. Just scan the QR code on the screen right now or click in the link below to fill out the form.
I just went through all these accolades of yourself, but what motivates you to keep going and moving in all these different directions?
None of that stuff, to be honest. It's, it comes from my planning days. And when you get through the experience where you sort of sit down with a client, often it's not sitting down face to face nowadays, but back in the day it was, and they were really stressed. You could just see it. Maybe there's relationship pressures, there's finance pressures, they're really confused, they're not sure what to do, they've got so much noise out there. And then you just start asking them questions and you just know that they haven't really thought about that. And then you start to, dig a bit deeper, and then you ask them questions, then you can just start to feel the pressure come out of their balloon as a couple or a family. And then you start to ask them more questions, and then they start getting a bit of an idea of where they're heading, and which they have basically parked and sort of been drifting. It's just busy, right? Life. And particularly younger people. I did a lot of the first 4 or 5 years with, 50, 60, 70-year-olds. And that was quite hard work because, just the way where they were in life. And when you pivot to sort of a 20-year-old, 30-year-old, 40-year-old, they need to have these conversations. And property is just such a huge intrinsic part of people's lives. And so what keeps me going is that, right? It's like I met them, they were thinking about doing this. We stopped them maybe heading down that direction. We challenged their thinking on this. They then agreed as a couple, this is where they're going to live and they're going to commit to. They then got pre-approved, then they made it happen. And that, I think, builds clients for life. And so, initially it's when you first meet them, and then what keeps you going is like 5, 6, 7, 8 years later, you're still talking to them, and then they're on to the next thing because they're, moving on with their life, but they just always come back to you for that trusted sort of sounding board. And so, that's business been going since 2014. It's 2026 now. It was just about me for the first 4 years, just because I was just me, and I was trying to figure it all out, and I was doing advice. And then since 2018, it's sort of been slowly growing our team out.
Yeah,
definitely client impact, but now it's so much more than that. It's like, all our team members are often around sort of 35 to sort of early 40s. They're all probably partnered up. Most of them have, got young kids. And so now it's way more than that. It's actually about helping them all succeed, and, as they're going through, their lives as well. And so, that also keeps me going because you can sort of see, the impact, the business is also helping them, achieve what they want to.
With that, to just jump in because it's so important, because I think most people think mortgage broker, they go there just to get debt, right?
Yeah.
Mortgage brokers are going to go to the banks, they're going to get me the best rates, they're going to find me the best, I suppose, access to debt, be that lending requirements for their fit for purpose, whether it's an individual or company, etc. But it's more than that, right? You talk a lot about, all I've heard thus far is strategy, seeing things that they may have overmissed, or consideration for what direction they're trying to go. What do you sort of see your role in that and what sort of, I guess, challenges, mistakes you see clients often make if you get in them so early in the journey.
Yeah, I think it's 26 now. I'm just getting old. I feel like winding back to these years. I didn't know. I just picked this business in Melbourne, right? Because I had a few offers. I was living in Melbourne, and I didn't know that it was actually a really strategic mortgage business. Like I could have joined any business. And when I go back in time, like he was kind of like, everyone's saying the OGs, and I don't even know what it stands for, to be honest. But, he's kind of that, right? Dave Johnson. And he was one who was thinking about things a lot more deeper than just, setting up mortgages and getting rates. He was very strategic in, how do you optimize this for tax? How do you build buffers? How do you, what's the mortgage strategy? How do you do an upgrade? How do you release equity? How do you, and he would focus all our attention on that. Is how do you guide someone to what he was calling a property plan? And so that opened your eyes up. And that's very much like a financial planner. That's why they had financial planning in-house as well to do the rest of the decisions. I mean, there's heaps of mistakes. I mean, first home buyers are, there's just so much. I mean, as time changes, their options change, right? Often, we saw obviously a lot of the off the plan stuff, 10 years ago. We saw a lot of the, rent vesting stuff where they, just didn't have the confidence to sort of just save a little bit more cash, waiting too long for saving a deposit and, not paying LMI, maybe buying something that suits them now but won't suit them in a year or two when the partner they've been with for 5 years and they were planning to get married and have a kid. So they buy what suits them today and they quickly outgrow it. Just rushing the decision. I mean, for first-time buyers, like it's really emotional. They give up. They get agents take them on a bit of a roller coaster and then they give up and they come back 4 or 5 years later. So the opportunity cost there. But I do think they sometimes focus, and this is a lot of the parents and society's influences, is just buy any property. Doesn't matter what you buy, all property goes up. You're never going to regret it. And then they also just want to tick the box. So they're ticking their box in life. And then they just want to say they own, they want to get that signed contract as quick as they can. And they kind of think, it doesn't really matter. So they don't do enough DD. They don't slow down. They don't understand that it's never going to be their forever home and that they're going to probably likely have to sell it. So they haven't even thought about that because they think that maybe they'll just keep it and they'll build this portfolio. And then when you slow them down and you really question them on all that, then you try to avoid all those mistakes and then just make sure they get a good asset. Like it's their one opportunity to actually set the first property up right. And if it goes well, then it leverages into the next option, right? It gives them more options to maybe upgrade or, et cetera. But if that doesn't go well, they really burn a lot of time. And it's really hard to sort of save your way to sort of wealth, right?
And capital, right? Borrowing, I said Reece all the time, I think the property game is as much a debt game as it is a property game, right? And if you've used up your capacity on the wrong asset or bad debt, it really limits your opportunity and cost you, 5 years, 10 years. Yeah. And for me, it cost me almost a decade for making the wrong decision at the start.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my properties too. I've got a house in Melbourne. It's in 10 years and had a 30-40% growth, which is not great. Yeah, I mean, it is a lending game. I think that's what, as your years on, you realize that there's always good properties. There's 11 million dwellings, right? They can always find something but you can't always get cash, right? And so you've got to be really careful how you use that capacity because that's like your gunpowder, right? And if you've only, and it's, when I started, it was 10, 12, 14 times your income in 2013, 14.
Is that right? It was 14 times your income.
Not like if you just went to one bank.
No, but you could get that. There were
so many holes. Because I was coming from an advice world and I was like, hang on a sec. So if I lodge with NAB, I can do this. But if I lodge it with this bank, they don't even look at that debt. Or if I fix it or I make it interest only, and it was just so many holes.
So many levers and holes.
Yeah. And you could literally, build rates were, they were higher, but they're sort of similar to where they are now. And so you could leverage up, and you could buy a lot more investment properties than you could homes, right? So maybe you could get 8 times your home, if you buy a house, but maybe 14 times if you're buying investments. You get 15-year interest only terms, which is amazing buffer. Yeah. And so every year it's got tighter. And now we're down at 5 times income. So that capacity or that opportunity is just so much tighter now. And so then you can't afford to waste it. Particularly, you're also using a lot of that because you're putting it towards a home.
Yeah.
Which is homes have changed a lot in the last, 10 years. And so, yeah, Stuart Weems in Melbourne, he's got a company called Pro Solutions. He's an advisor, accountant, broker as well.
Guy?
Yeah.
Oh, big fan of his.
Yeah, well, that's one of his sayings. So I always, give credit where it's due. And he says that it's a game of lending. And, I think once people really grasp that, they're like, okay, I need to know the property market, but I need to And that's, you might do it for an interest point of view, but you're not going to buy heaps of property, right? Really what you want to do is really protect your borrowing capacity and understand how important it is, particularly if you're investing, because, sometimes things go well and sometimes things don't go well, i.e. the last 4 years with interest rates running on you. And so the ones who thought about lending really carefully and made sure they didn't over leverage, or maybe they structured the loan the right way and they had buffers and they offset accounts and they reactivated equity when they could, and they've been able to ride the wave. But the ones who maybe just, didn't think it through and didn't have enough buffers, they had to bail, and they weren't able to hold those assets, which has kind of defeated the purpose. And so, yeah, it absolutely is a game of lending.
And you mentioned there, how loose it probably was back in 2017.
It was 13, 14, yeah.
2013, 14. And, we've probably seen in the market in the last 3 to 6 months starting to tighten up, especially more on the investor lending activity. APRA's come out and capped the LTI, and we've seen the trust lending, a lot of the majors pull out of that. Do you think we're going to see any more tightening in that space, I guess, moving for the rest of 2026?
It was every year it was getting tighter and tighter, like capacity and, also like banks' ability to sort of bend the rules and exceptions on file. And, the bank's credit teams are always changing as well. And so you've sometimes got to, private banks were able to do a little bit different. You had someone who's very experienced credit assessor who knows how to get it through. But there was probably a time, maybe 2-3 years ago, where the non-banks just started coming out more and more. And, the trusts were there, the self-managed super fund lending. And I was like, wow, it's kind of going back the other way. And, even leveraging super, I was, going, my team's just all over that. And I was like, are you sure we can do this? Like, I was just blown away at some of the multiples. We haven't gone anywhere near that. Like, we haven't got anywhere near you saw it all on all the YouTube about 6-12 months ago, unlimited borrowing capacity, every broker in the world just wanted to jump on that train. But like, if you've been around for a while, that there's a point in time where something may be attractive, but if it's too attractive, it's going to get shut down, right? And often those were getting through with, some help of accountants, was the client fully educated on the risk? I don't know. And it's the same as like non-bank lending. We've always been very nervous of that because it's very clear when credit gets tight, who gets hit. And, you don't want to put all your clients in leveraging way beyond what they can borrow at the major banks. Then there's a credit tightening and then they get stuck. They become mortgage prisoners at banks that will charge them too much in interest rates. And so there's a lot of brokers that got burnt there because they leveraged their clients up and their clients got stuck on high rates and they haven't been able to, refinance those clients down to low rates. All the other banks had a mortgage war, but, you got stuck at a non-bank. And that could be the difference between you holding the property or selling it, right? They'll argue that I wouldn't have been able to buy it if I didn't be able to get the debt. Well, that is okay if you're able to hold it. And I don't think a lot of people have been able to hold those super big portfolios, unless they had huge equity or buffers or something. But that's not likely if you're leveraging that far.
And that's the problem, right? Because we know the entry costs, if you're paying sometimes a buyer's agent or someone on the way through, there's obviously stamp duty and holding costs as well as your exit costs. If you're not holding that property for at least a few years, a lot of the potential upside's being washed away with fees, right? So in that scenario there, these people that are taking on arguably too much debt and they can't hold it, have to sell it, they've essentially walked away sometimes with nothing. And I think, it sounds like you're very responsible. You say never push clients, to their nth degree or anything like that. There's risk with debt, right? That's the other side of the equation. Yes, property is a debt game, but it comes with risk.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you got to be, and it's not to say we haven't, done that, but it's just we're doing it with making sure we're really educated on the buffers. And secondly, what are the assets? You don't want to take too much debt, a lot of risk with debt and then take a lot of risk with property asset as well. And so if you're really pushing it and you're going, look, I'm trying to take a momentum play, I'm going to the next hotspot, which may or may not work. I'm going to try to time it and then sell it. And, if it doesn't work out and you've leveraged up, like, is that going to be, catastrophic to everything else? Do you have to then sell your home or do you have to sell? And so you've got to be careful. Are you risking it with debt? And then also people's situations are changing. Some are, super confident. I'm 1 year away from, an associate to a senior associate or partner. And I know my salary is going to jump dramatically, or they're going through study and I know when I get that. So someone's income growth or confidence could be dramatically, know that in 12 months time. So they're leveraging up today, knowing that tomorrow in 12 months time, they're going to be okay. But then some people are running businesses, right? And businesses are changing. And so you've got to be also careful. They're going, has it just been a good year or how sustainable it is? And we ask those questions because, we just don't want a client to, be forced to sell because like you say, the turnover costs are just so huge. And also we do, we have leveraged a lot of people around upgrading, because, a lot of people who are, they're trying to lock in assets that they'll hold in for 15 years. And so, even if they're under a bit of pressure today, I guess they're not worrying about the market running on them. And so, it's tight. We're just paying our mortgages. We're not getting ahead of it, but the market's not running on us. We're not going to have to pay, 10, 15% more in a few years' time, and we can lock in that house that'll suit us for the next 15 years. And so we've definitely encouraged a lot of people to do that through the home ownership.
Yeah. And we've seen that numerous times through our business. And I think it was even a podcast listener that reached out where they were looking to access their self-managed super fund, went to a buyer's agent, a buyer's agent that's probably well known in Australia, and they recommended 2 really speculative regional play assets. And luckily they'd heard this guy's voice so much on the podcast where we're really talking about education in terms of the right assets to be buying, especially for something like a self-managed super fund where it is a particular asset you need. But they were getting recommended, rather than coming in with I think their budget was like 1.1 million, they're getting recommended 2 500K regional asset plays. And luckily they heard the podcast, they reached out and went down more the blue chip route. But it is something we're seeing quite a lot here, I guess, in the space, in the property space.
Yeah, exactly. And so you've got lending, like pushing your lending, and then secondly, you're pushing it within a self-managed super fund. And then you don't get a second chance with your super. That's meant to be your backstop, right? That's meant to be like, if I don't ever build enough wealth here, when I retire, this money's just compounded for me for the next 30 years. And, super's got such a bad name, but really it's an investment portfolio of shares pretty much. And it'll perform quite well over the next 30, 40 years if you just don't touch it and you keep it in a low-cost fund and you just let it compound. Let's do its thing, right? Like, it's not, it might have a bad year here and there, but overall, when you come back 2 or 3 years down the line, you're like, oh, actually, it's still performing quite well. And so I think people are motivated just to, they're already overexposed with property, and then they go and put their super on a property as well. But unfortunately, they take the wrong asset in the wrong structure. Like, that's the way you should be the least taking risks. You should just be buying something that in 30, 40 years time, it's going to be super scarce. It's going to be highly desirable. It's going to suit a huge, big, broad pool of buyers that are either got wealth or earning good money. And you just can sleep at night. No, I haven't punted my super as well. And, because that should be money. Should just gives you confidence every year that, if things don't go well, I'm going to be okay because I've got this super.
Talking through education. So you're very passionate about your journey and why you got into it, and even the types of clients that you've been helping along the way. How important do you think that sort of free education is out there at the moment, where people can upskill themselves, like in this new social media day and age? I mentioned at the start, you got 4 podcasts, so there's a lot of good content there. Not saying advice, by the way, because we purely from an educational standpoint. How important do you think that is at the moment?
Well, some people would consider it advice. There's been an attack with ASIC, with influencers, and a real shutdown for some people who, are definitely stepping way down the wrong route. I'd say in the property market, you've got to be extremely careful. Like, we're not pushing it. We have 0 partnerships with buyers agents where we get paid. So, we just stay independent of all that. We just sort of guide clients. And we get paid from mortgages. We get paid from, clients for life who refer to us. Absolutely. But we're not trying to push an individual strategy down clients. And unfortunately, the property space is completely unregulated. And so if you're not stepping into financial advice, you're stepping into property advice, well, you're sort of in this little bubble. I do think it will get shut down because I think the proliferation of marketing experts that are calling themselves buyers agents who haven't really got, it's a job that takes a long time to get good at. Like, let's be real. Like, you're not just coming in day one and then know the market. Like, I've been talking about this since 2012. I still don't feel like I know so much, and I'm learning more about zoning and developing, and that's kind of my baby at the moment that I'm trying to focus and learn a lot about because I feel like it's changing, particularly in Sydney, and I've got to be across it. But as a buyer's agent, firstly, you've got to know that. You've got to know the local market. Then you've got to know all the agents. Then you've got to know all the negotiation tactics. And then you've got to really understand how to value the property and, all the DD that you miss. And DD is, years of learnings, right? So I guess with these buyer's agents, they haven't been doing it very long. They haven't got many clients because they're high-priced service. And so, they've been doing it for 3 years, but how many clients have actually got through and have actually bought? They might have seen a lot of properties, but the skills in negotiation and valuing take years. And often they're doing it across lots of different markets, which makes it even harder because you don't get that local experience. You're not getting any of that deep knowledge.
Are you a property investor? If so, we have just launched our property portfolio solution, which is helping our clients maximize their portfolio, not by adding more properties, but getting more bang for buck in terms of output across their entire portfolio. It's adding the 1, 2, 3%ers to get those marginal differences to get more output over the long term. If you're interested, click the link below or scan the QR code to join our waiting list.
Often they're not even doing it on the ground either. Like we're hearing a lot of buyer's agent activity where they're working internationally or, on the other side of the country.
Yeah, they just believe that buying the market, and they'll get a certain bank val 6 months later and send it to the client, said, hey, your property's gone up. Yeah, well, that bank's incentivized to give you very high valuations. Go do that at 2 or 3 more banks and you'll probably find that it's not that result. Secondly, why is 6 months a good test on an investment turn? And, minus off stamp duty, minus off selling costs, minus off capital gains tax, minus off buyer's agency fee. Are you in the red yet? No. So, I think that's my frustration with it, is it's all short term. It's all about just buying into the market. There's a lot of games they play with, if you don't buy now, give it to someone else, this scarcity. They're just, and there's so much competition of briefs. Like, that was one of the first things I learned. It's like, okay, so if I'm gauging you as a buyer's agent and say I want to buy a house at 1.5 in your pocket, are you going to take on another brief at 1.5? And then good buyer's agent will say no, because, you've got that brief in that marketplace. How can I buy 2 of them? When they go off the books, I can take you on. So that's what good buyer's agents would do, is they would say it's competing briefs. I can take on someone at 1.8 to 2. I can take someone at 1.2. But if you're around the same price point, looking at the same suburbs, like, I just can't take you on. But, these investment buyer's agents can have 30 briefs trying to buy in the same market. Like, who gets the good one? And when you're trying to buy that amount of scale, like you say, not even on the ground, using property managers who don't understand capital growth, it's huge dangers. And unfortunately, I think what's going to happen is that you're seeing a restructuring of the rental market, right? So capital city investors have been bailing, right? Because they've got mortgages they want to pay. They're all getting older as well, so they get into their 50s, 60s, and they look at property and they go, do I really want $1 million equity in a resi property with higher land tax? I'll rather put that in my super fund. So they're all bailing, plus interest rates, plus wanting to give money to their kids. And then you've got this new wave of investors just buying in regions, right? So you're creating a lot more rental accommodation in regions, and capital cities are just getting tighter and tighter. And, a lot of investors are bailing out of high-rise apartments just because of, you're pissed off because you bought it in 2006, an apartment in Melbourne in 2026, it's still worth the same. And finally, I can make a paper profit, which isn't anyway, right, when you add all those other things on. And so you're finding that, we're going to have a huge rental crisis. It's just going to get a lot worse over the next 5 years. And so the people who are losing out of this is the renters. We've got more rental properties in this regional location, but and then whenever there is a bit of a tough market, like, those are momentum investors. So they'll bail just as quick as they get in. So if they can put that money elsewhere. And so what you're doing is you're just creating this short-term boom in rentals, and then they'll all bail at one point because they'll go, the returns aren't here, and particularly if prices start correcting. And then so what you haven't really created much long-term rental supply. And so I think this, and the scale they're buying, when you add it up, which I'm doing at the moment across all these firms, like, we're talking thousands of properties a month that these, and collectively they're moving markets. So, a lot of people say you can't push property markets. Absolutely you can. You're buying a scarce number of properties on the market and you're increasing demand in the short time, and you're actually buying the properties in the same suburbs you were buying 6 months ago, you're pushing the market up. And I think that's, firstly, the tack on trust lending, but I do think we'll go to these property influence sort of big organisations will be definitely getting watched.
It's interesting because it's like a new wave, and you've been around for a while, as have I, and you've seen that move from more of a house and land package type scenario where there was a lot of people that essentially are builders or builder brokers in the background that were pushing house and land packages, and that was sort of early 2010 to 15. There's a big wave of that.
Yep.
And I look at the wave now, it's the same type of company, same type of people, but they're sort of repackaging them, and they're not buying house and land because they can get on a podcast and say, look, we don't buy that, we don't promote off the plan. But essentially going to these regional markets where it's easy to buy, access to property has been available because some of these markets have gone through some pretty horrendous times. We've seen 30-40% drops in values in tough times. And then they go up and they artificially inflate the markets themselves, and their competitors come in and do the same. And my concern is when you go in a market where there's more investors than own occupiers, at some point, the local market's not going to be able to afford it. The investors will come and go. And what's going to happen to these markets? You're going to see a bloodbath.
And I think that also, it kind of keeps first-home buyers really stuck in properties a bit too long because it eats away their equity, etc. So I think the government should shift to land tax for first-home buyers. But whatever they give them is going to go into prices. That'd be the reform. I think the 5% deposit scheme is super attractive, which I said before, but I don't think the government's going to change it. And I do think it's good in some way because it is meaning that the rental market is absolutely horrendous, all right? And it's going to get worse, which I spoke about. Vacancy rates at 1%. They're okay if you're a good applicant. Like if you've got you're working, your partner's working, you've got a bit of savings, like you've got a good rental history, yeah, you can still go rent in a 1% vacancy rate. But a lot of people just aren't in that position. And that's causing a lot of issues. And so there are a lot of first-home buyers that, potentially can buy. Like we've helped a lot of single sort of first-home buyers that, like it's really stressful. And, they've got a little place, maybe a little unit. And, that's something that they're super proud of. And it just gives them a really bit of a runway. So, but yeah, I wouldn't make too much to help first-home buyers. They've already got enough.
Good closing there. Chris Bates, thank you for joining the Follio Property Podcast.
Enjoyed coming on. Thanks, guys.